Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family. Sharon Kyle here, along with my husband and co-founder of the LA Progressive, Dick Price.
Hi, Sugar.
And today we're joined by Henry Amon Giroux. I called you by your full name. I don't know why I did that, Henry. Henry is a regular contributor and co-editor of the LA Progressive. He currently holds the McMaster University Chair for Scholarship in the Public Interest in the English and Cultural Studies Department and is the Paulo Freire Distinguished Scholar in Critical Pedagogy. His latest book is The Burden of Conscience, Educating Beyond the Veil of Silence. Hey, Henry, how you
Hi,
doing?
Sharon. Good.
Hi.
How are you? Hi, Dick.
It's always really a
We get
treat for us to
excited.
start a week out
We
talking to
enjoy
you,
it
and you've
so
got so much to
much.
say. So recently, you wrote an article about Trump's politics of defecation, and as starting point is this ugly little AI-generated video that came out after the No Kings March, where Trump is shown as the pilot of a bomber uh, doing a bombing run and dropping defecation on protesters. And it's certainly an ugly little piece of owning the libs, but your article goes into there's a much deeper and uglier significance to it. Do you want to talk about some of that?
Well, I mean, what I tried to say in the article was that this is far from just, a version of Trump entertainment, with his obsession with image culture or in videos. It really suggests the merging of a kind of warlike mentality and the notion that violence is really an extension, that politics is nothing more than an extension of violence. And basically he portrays that in very graphic forms. I mean, it's to me it's kind of a mirror into both the psyche of the man, which is it seems to me utterly demented and corrupt, and at the same time a total indifference to any sense of justice, any sense of it seems to me a larger dialogue that could raise questions about the state of the country and democracy itself. There's more, it's more than vulgarity. And what I was trying to say in the piece that the press basically treats it as vulgarity, that it's crude and it's vulgar, but it isn't just crude and vulgar. It's basically a message to the American people that we don't care about you. We don't care about protests. We don't care about resistance. And as a matter of fact, we're going to do something really degrading, that ultimately says something about how much we detest democracy and how much we detest any sense of moral responsibility and political responsibility. And that not only am I untouchable, but I'm flying a plane. Everybody missed this. I'm flying a bomber. And he wasn't just in a regular kind of plane, right? He was in a bomber, and he has the king's throne on. And it's not about owning the libs. It's like saying, hey, look, I own this country. I am a dictator. I do believe in authoritarianism. And not only do you have no right to challenge that, but I'm going to do everything I can, as I've done since 2016, to use the language of demonization and humiliation to sort of portray how I feel about that.
Absolutely. When I heard about that and saw that video, it reminded me of a book that I read years ago by a man named Arnold Ludwig. And the name of the book is King of the Mountain, The Nature of Political Leadership. And what Arnold Ludwig does, he does an 18-year investigation into why people seek power, and he profiles leaders from the 20th century. And his core argument is that many political rulers exhibit behaviors akin to dominance hierarchies in primates, primarily chimpanzees, baboons, and gorillas. And I don't know, how familiar you are with this, but I love reading about chimpanzees. And we right, we recently lost Jane Goodall. So I followed her career, but when they become very antagonistic against humans, and especially when they're captive, they throw their feces, and that's what made me think of this book. It's such a clear demonstration of what's in his psyche.
I mean, I think that what's so interesting about Trump is that he basically is part of the Walking Dead, who now have assumed power in the United States and in some ways in many other countries. and their hands are filled with blood and their mouth is filled with feces. I mean, they just talk crap. I mean, and as a matter of fact, when we talk about feces, the politics of defecation in this instance, what we're really saying is that's the only language he knows. And
Yeah.
that's the only form of politics he understands. And there's also there's a kind of psychosexual dimension to all of this, this obsession with with orifices and
Mm-hmm.
feces and
Mm-hmm.
to drag the level of discourse to that particular level, to drag the discourse to that particular level, in some ways, is really about the spectacle and the glamour of authoritarianism. I mean, that what Trump has done in ways that actually other authoritarians are really too sophisticated to do, right? He trades in shit, and he makes it clear, right, that authoritarianism really is about the grammar of authority. It really is about authoritarianism. Really is about the grammar of waste, of pillage, of destruction, of blood, of war, and in some ways, that video sort of brings them all together, much in the way that I think was missed by the press. I mean, everybody was offended by it, but this is unchecked rage, sort of becoming ocular, right? I mean, this is the fascist sort of obsession with the spectacle being reduced not to monumentalism, but being reduced to infantilism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different kind of spectacle. It's one that sort of reveals itself because it only can. It's not about really control at all. I mean, think about that. It's not about control. I mean, he could have done a video in which he could have been more manipulative and said, "Well, this is okay, but it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't think it really represents who the American people are." I mean, they could have done that, but instead he resorts to debasement and humiliation. He resorts to an almost pornographic theater of sadism in some ways. And I think that word sadism is very important here because it ties in, the whole video ties in with his obsession with cruelty, his lack of empathy, his disgusting view of human beings as unworthy of even being American citizens if they're black or brown or immigrants or people who basically are dissenters. I mean, what strikes me as so amazing about him is not just his incredible stupidity, which is almost unparalleled in American history for any president, I think. He doesn't know anything about history, he makes things up, but it's the pathology that drives him that is scary,
Yeah.
because he's a pathological liar. He's completely divorced from reality. It's completely divorced from reality. He has no sense of empathy whatsoever. I mean, this is an age of authoritarianism in which the zombie becomes the model of leadership,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's the walking dead. He has anything to do with life has nothing to do with this guy. Nothing. And he despises it. I mean, even at Kirk's funeral, where Kirk's wife gets up and says, I forgive this guy. We need to come together. In front of an entire stadium, he says, not me. I hate people.
Oh my
Right.
gosh, I
I
know.
hate my enemies. I mean, the level of contempt that this guy exhibits is exemplified in the oozing crap that comes from his body. That is the only way he can respond to anything that he doesn't like. He oozes the feces. That's what he does in the metaphoric sense. And the
Mhm.
video just so captures that. And not to mention the accoutrements of dictatorship, right?
Yeah.
The crown, I'm the king. Oh, I mean, it would be comic if it didn't testify to the degree of civic illiteracy, cravenly cowardiceness, and the lack of an oppositional political party in the United States. I mean, because obviously he feels no threat, no resistance whatsoever. And in some ways, I mean, even with Mamdani now you're running tomorrow in New York, and we read today that Bill Clinton just came out for Cuomo. And I wrote on my Facebook page today about how this is another exhibition of feces dominating politics, if I may carry the metaphor to extremes, right? I mean, because that's what the Democratic Party is. It's the soft side of Wall Street, you know, and it seems to me that what it reveals is a party that is incapable of urging workers to mobilize,
Right.
get in the streets, to offer up real resistance. Even the New York Times, the other side of Wall Street, right, writes a huge editorial in the last few days in which it talks about how Trump is doing all these things that speak to authoritarianism. There's
Right.
not one mention of fascism in that entire piece.
Right.
Not one.
Right.
Authoritarianism is a soft term, and it doesn't quite parallel with the real excesses and the violence of history, but fascism does. Fascism does that, and fascism takes us into another room. We go through a different door, and it seems to me that what we see with Trump is actually an ability to recognize that the resistance outside of the left, people on the left, some people on the left, he has nothing to be afraid of.
He absolutely
Yeah.
has nothing to be afraid of. I'm sorry, honey. Go ahead.
So yeah, as I was reading the piece again, I mean, there's a couple recent logical extensions to it that takes it even to a darker place. Because Trump's defenders will say, well, it's just a little video, it's all in fun, you don't have a sense of humor, get over it. But two things. Last night he was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and he was asked, isn't he upset about the beatings his ICE thugs are giving to people on cities around the country? And he says, no, I don't think they've gone nearly far enough.
Yeah, I read. I can't watch it, but I read it.
And I didn't watch it either. But we got to remember, in his first administration, he was asking his Secretary of Defense well, couldn't we just shoot protesters in the legs?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I read about that too.
And then the second thing is, they're taking great delight in the fact that they're blowing open motorboats out of the Caribbean. And they seem quite pleased with the fact that they've killed 50 people. They don't have the faintest idea what they were doing there, as if anybody is going to take an open motorboat with outboard motors and drive it 3,000 miles from Venezuela to Florida. But it's that same kind of, and they haven't killed 50 people. They've killed 50 narco terrorists, demean them even further. I mean, that is from the beginning, that has been Trump's word, demeaning his opponents or people he doesn't like, demeaning women. It's a part of his nature. And the worst thing is, it spreads to all the cult members who use the same kind of language.
I mean, I think the thing that scares me the most, and some people are now writing about this and talking about it. I mean, this abuse of due process is really a precondition for something much more terrorizing, and that is that if Trump feels that he can kill people without any legal response, any real moral political response en masse,
Right.
simply because he labels them as narco terrorists or even domestic terrorists, which
Right.
means he could kill anybody. I mean, if he really wanted to. I mean, he's already set the conditions for that. Trump is preparing, in my estimation, for martial law.
Right.
That's what he's doing. He keeps pushing the envelope farther and further until he's at the point where he is convinced that there'll be some episode in Chicago, some episode in DC, somebody will be killed, and he'll declare martial law. And then he won't have to worry any longer about, in some way answering questions. He'll just say, I'm sorry, the terrorists are taking over the country. We don't need a democracy. We just need the rule of tyranny. And that's exactly what he's doing. And it's coming. And I think until people figure out how to bring this country to a stop economically and in ways that shut down the most vital organs of what it means to be in the United States, unless they want to continue, for instance, starving. I mean, let's go back for a moment and talk about this shutdown, and how, I mean, he's off. 40 million people are going to not have food starting in a few days. And he saw flying around the country and posting videos about his new toilet. I mean, what does it take to invigorate the notion of civic literacy so that it can be translated into a notion of civic courage?
Right.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and that to me, I have to tell you, as I've been moving through this since 2016, at the very least, this shock of the death of democracy, out front and in front of us. What shocks me the most is the stupidity of the culture. The way in which this culture has been taken over by billionaires, made people dumb. The refusal to basically recognize a threat when you see it. Paulo Freire, whom I worked with for 15 years, was one of the most famous radical educators in the world until he died in 1997. He began his movement in organizing people by educating peasants, teaching them how to read. Because he believed, he had a saying, he said, if you can read the word, you can read the world.
Right.
And that's dangerous. And it seems to me that we have so given up on any notion of civic education, so given up on the value of education as being central to democracy, that we have now allowed him to basically subvert and kill off and ruin and compromise even some of the most prestigious universities in the United States, which have shamefully, in many ways, been compromised with him.
Right.
And so I think his defecating on people who are protesting is sort of, in some ways, a response to the inability of people to basically stand up to him and instill in him not just simply a sense of responsibility, but a sense of fear. When you see people as jerks, when you believe they have no courage, when you believe that people won't resist, then you have free reign. And if you're pathologically demented, which he is, of course, then you'll do anything you want. You'll talk about toilets while people are starving. You'll refuse in some ways to address climate change. You'll appear before the United Nations and say to a body of sophisticated people, climate change is a joke. Why are you doing it? While the world burns. What strikes me, and I'll end here, I'm sorry, I'm going on too much, I think, but what ends here is the contradiction. The contradiction between injustice and justice, the contradiction between the truth and the lies. I mean, the piece that you published about the law being lawless, nobody talks about the contradiction. They just say that's illegal or that's this. And nobody says, but wait a minute, how can he talk about the law and law and order when he's pardoned 1,500 criminals? How can he talk about law and order when in fact, he's in cahoots with gangsters and crypto psychos? I mean, none of this is pointed out. The contradiction between the reality and the truth, the contradiction between what should be and what is not happening, somehow fades away. And all we get caught up with is the spectacle. People are hungry. Well, wait a minute. People shouldn't be hungry in the richest country in the world. People don't have health care. Wait a minute. Every other country in the world that's in a prominent country has health care. I'm just amazed at how the issues get isolated, they get spectacularized, and ultimately they turn into entertainment.
That's right. And that is partly due to the way that our media has
Right.
the ownership of media has been concentrated in the hands of a very few well-heeled elite corporations, and independent media gets so little support.
Oh.
So I'm going to put in a plug right here. I'm not asking people for money. If you like the LA Progressive, if you enjoy and learn from Henry Giroux, please share this content. That is the primary way that our message gets to other people. We are not the New York Times or the Washington Post, who are part of the problem.
Indeed.
A part of what goes on is, people, broadcasters, newscasters, opinionators do point out the various things that Trump does and how it's illegal to do that and how horrible it is to cut off people's food. But then they go right to the next story. Whereas, even a thing like this video of King Trump dropping shit on people should just stop the clocks. Just wait, we can't go on beyond this. We can't have a president who does this. Let's not, we can't be talking about his damn bathroom or his Great Gatsby ball in Mar-a-Lago. No, we have to say he's unqualified and we need to stop him.
And we need to say why he's unqualified.
But the news media are in it for the clicks, and so they go on to the next story, and then they'll say the next time, well, he's still lying. Well, let's go on to Melania's outfit.
Yeah, that's why we're not asking for money at this very moment. Really, I'm being honest, because forget it. If we ask for money, they don't send it. So what we want is for people to share this content. We are in a crisis in this nation, and anyone listening to this knows that that is true. So please share.
I mean, the thing about fascism is that it sets the pace for the language that becomes legitimate, right? It creates a culture that narrows the questions that can be asked. But most importantly, it isolates issues so that it makes it easier, as Dick was saying, to jump from one issue to the next without bringing them together and saying, okay, when you make the connections here, what are we talking about, right? I mean, what's really at stake? It's not just the video of him degrading protesters. It's basically a system that degrades any viable notion of the future in democracy.
Right.
It's a system that basically is steeped in inequality. It's a system run, I mean, algorithms which determine people's lives now. Six companies dominate that the media over algorithm, determine the algorithms. No democracy can exist with that level of inequality. So we don't talk about inequality. We don't talk about capitalism. We don't talk about the need for a system that basically is more important, celebrates human needs over human profits. We talk about incidents that basically are always defined within the concept of entertainment, always defined within the concept of the clickbait. Okay, we got enough of that. I mean, this is a country that is drowning in immediacy. It's lost the ability to get beyond the cult of immediacy. It's lost the ability to translate private issues into larger public concerns. It's lost the ability to recognize that militarization of a society is about the death of society, that in itself is a form of violence.
So Henry, tell us, you are a professor, and so you interact with the younger generation. What's your sense on how they're experiencing what's happening right now in this country?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been teaching for 40 years. This generation of young people that I deal with, certainly at Mac, are the smartest group of kids I've ever dealt with. They bring things together. They read. They understand the media. They're not racist by any stretch of the imagination. I think they're enormously literate, incredibly smart. And my faith, long when I'm gone, will be in that generation. They're smarter than we are. They're a bit overwhelmed. They're trying, too much is coming at them. We had the war in Vietnam, our generation, right? That was a kind of singular issue that you could really focus on and mobilize people around. They got 100 issues that they're trying to figure out. But the fact of the matter is, they're not limited by borders or disciplines. They don't think the way academies want them to. They ooze into other disciplines. They bleed into each other. They're enormously anti-racist and anti-misogynist. I mean, the question of color, the question of solidifying race, it's all nonsense to them. And they know what it's about. They know it's about a generation that is steeped in domination and fascism. And they're looking for a language, a narrative to bring them together that holds all these pieces together under one roof. And that language should be radical socialism, or even better, radical democracy. I mean, I like radical. My late friend Stanley Aronowitz, radical democracy makes a lot of sense to me because democracy resonates with people. We just have to take it away from capitalist values. We have to take it away from a really destructive system that makes the claim that it's about democracy, when actually it has nothing to do with democracy at all.
Absolutely not. And in my opinion, the two cannot coexist.
I
We
exist. I
cannot
agree.
have the kind of
No.
predatory capitalism that we practice
No.
in the United States and democracy at the
No.
same time. They
No,
just
no.
can't
You,
coexist.
you can't have a system that claims that if people don't have enough money, they can die from brain cancer. I'm sorry. You can't have a system that says that poverty is basically a personal issue and not a systemic issue. You can't have a country that really believes that wealth doesn't drive politics. What? I mean, are you kidding? You know, or even like this interview in 60 Minutes with Trump, throwing these softball questions at people. It's just horrendous. I mean, there's no real investigative reporting anymore. The questions that need to be asked that would bring issues together, that would explode and burst through the lies, don't exist, except in the basically left media. I mean, that's it. You know, in places like LA Progressive and Counterpunch and Truth Out, Common Dreams, you know, The Intercept does an enormously important job. ProPublica. I mean, these are beacons of justice and truth, but they're small and they've got to be supported. People have to share information, among other things.
That's right. Well, we want to ask a question? I was going to say, we're going to wrap it up for today, Henry.
Okay,
As always, you continue to share your truths, and we appreciate it. LA Progressive is better for having you as a part of it, and we just thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, we had to wrap up a little early because we got to talk about Melania's latest outfit, right?
Please.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
No, actually, we should talk about, was it, who was it who paid $4 million to get her documentary? Oh my God. Really? $4 million. That documentary would last 7 seconds. Anyways, okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
So long.
See you later.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.